This is part 2 of the bike reviews, and this will cover the 1984 KTM 495. Before I do this, let's get some myths and history covered first. The KTM 495 has several legends associated with it, the first being the 124 mile per hour speed record set in 1981. There are those who dispute this for whatever reasons, or doubt it occurred, or declare it was not official. However, there is an article on the subject, and Super Hunky swears it occurred. Whatever the case, it really does not matter. I think we can all at least agree that a 500 Class 2 stroke has power enough that it is possible for one of them to have gone 124 mile per hour. After all, the last record that was ever measured was on a KX 500 at around 130 mile per hour. In any case, that was done with a 1981 KTM 495, which not only did they change the front and rear sprockets to gear the bike higher, they also changed one of the gears in transmission because they could not get sprockets high enough. The 1981 was a piston port engine and did not have reeds. The 1982 is the first year for reeds and was named Open Class Bike of the Year. The 1981 and 1982 bikes are said to be the hardest hitting of the KTM 495s. The magic of the KTM 495 is that it is known as an overly quadratic engine. In other words, it has a very short stroke and a very big bore. The piston is actually quite large at 92.25 millimeter. That is the stock size, but aftermarket pistons can go past 93 millimeters. Let's put this in perspective. A 1986 Honda CR500 has an 89mm bore, a 79mm stroke. So the bore is 12% bigger than the stroke. A 2001 CR250 has a 66.4mm bore and a 72mm stroke. The stroke is 8% longer than the bore. A 2004 RM125 has a 54mm bore and a 54.5mm stroke. This is pretty much even bore to stroke. The 1984 KTM 495 has a 92.25mm bore and a 74mm stroke. This means the bore is 20% bigger than the stroke. KTM isn't really the first to do this though. Let's look at the 1973 Maico 501. This bike has a 91.6mm bore and a 76mm stroke. The bore is 18% bigger than the stroke. The KTM 495 was manufactured from 1981 to 1984. In 1985, KTM made the KTM 500, which was no longer an overly quadratic engine. The next thing I will mention is that I have the 1984 model KTM 495. In 1984, the bike was toned down, and my compression ratio is 11:1, whereas all three previous KTM 495s were 14:1. Sweet Maico told me before I got it running that this bike was going to be completely different from the Maicos and be hard-hitting, high-revving, no off-the-idle smooth power. Well, he probably would have been correct had I not had the 1984 model. Previous models, that's how the reviews go. High-revving, hard-hitting, no low end. However, the reviews are quite different for the 1984 model, and so I had some expectation that this might actually be a good trail bike. The reviews for the 1984 MXC model stated that the bike had a lot of low-end power and was geared for the trails. This is absolutely correct. Now, my primary drive is geared lower than stock, but not by much, maybe 5 miles per hour, less than stock. However, first gear is walking speed on this bike. Second gear is almost a normal first gear, and there's a huge gap between second and third. The MX version is a 4-speed, and first gear is higher and faster than second gear of the bike that I have. 3 through 5 on my bike are the same as 2 through 4 on the MX version. I have to say that this bike does very good on the trails. The bike is easy to ride, and a very responsive bike. There are a few nits about the bike. The first is that the bike does not handle. It likes to go in a straight line, although it does handle better than the CR and it's easier to get used to. The turning radius on the bike seems quite small as well. The last thing is that this bike does vibrate, but not that bad. Overall, I have to say this bike is very good for the trails, very easy to roll on the power, and has a lot of power right off of idle. Unlike the CR, this bike actually rides great in the mud, and it always has traction. You can start in the middle of a hill easily. Sometimes though you have to know when to use second gear if a hill isn't going to allow you just to putt right up it, because otherwise the bike doesn't spin out and maintains great traction. The biggest downfall of this bike is the price of parts and availability of parts. It's very hard to get parts for this bike, and it took me 2 years to build it. I'd recommend this bike as a trail bike otherwise though. Like I said, it has a lot of low-end power. The power is easy to roll on and very controllable. You can hit this bike down hard if you want to, but you don't have to do that.